welcome to the latest episode of the Good Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Right, this afternoon, or this evening, or whatever it is, I thought it would be interesting to carry on having a look at non-Scottish whiskies. Today's tasting, we're looking at two Indian whiskies. Yep, they distill whiskey pretty much everywhere in the world these days. But so I thought, yeah, let's have a look at two Indian distilleries. The first one we're looking at is Amrut, which is, well, pretty much well established now. The distillery itself was founded in 1948, I believe. Initially, the company produced blended whiskey, and most of it was obviously sort of sold in the home market. And it wasn't until 2004 when they decided to start exporting. And it was a few years after that that the distillery sort of came to my attention, it has to be said. But so that's Amrut. The other one that we're looking at will be the John Paul Distillery, a much newer distillery. I believe was founded in 1992, or certainly the company was founded in 1992, and again very similar to Amrut. All its production was geared towards producing blended malt for the home market, and they didn't release their first single malt until last year, which again is, you know, where I came to discover it. In actual fact, the rep basically said, oh, we've got this great Indian whiskey, and I go, oh yeah, okay, so he kind of talked me into it. I mean, admittedly, I'd read Jim Murray's notes on the spirit, and you know, he gave it a very, very good review. So I thought, well, right, let's give it a shot, and I got a couple of samples, which I have here, well, I was pleasantly surprised, should we say. So, Indian whiskey, it's interesting. I mean, firstly, the spirit itself, both spirits are fairly young, no older than 4 years old. The reason for that is obvious. I think it's the heat. As you know, that in hotter climates you lose more to the angel share, and if you can remember back a few episodes when I interviewed David Fitt at the St George's Distillery, he was saying pretty much the same about the climate in Norfolk as compared to the climate in Scotland. In Scotland, you would expect to lose between sort of 1 and 2% per year, but in India, where the temperatures are, well, I think they regularly get up to about 40 degrees centigrade with probably an average temperature of around about sort of 20, the evaporation is considerably more, anywhere between sort of 12 and about probably 16%. So when you think about it, you're losing sort of, you know, that kind of quantity of spirit each year. You can't age it for very long at all, you know, because pretty much it'll all just evaporate and disappear. So the thing about obviously aging in a sort of dry, hot climate is that you lose volume, but you tend to keep the alcohol percentage. So if you fill at a relatively high ABV, at least when you come to bottle and you sort of then can sort of break it down to say sort of, you know, 46% or whatever is your ABV, you're still going to have some quantity from the casks. The other thing, obviously, about this loss of liquid, this quick loss of liquid, is that the liquid that remains is going to have a lot more wood contact. So it's, again, you're going to get a lot more wood character. You're probably not going to get so much of the sort of oxidation character because it just hasn't spent that much time in contact with air, as opposed to, say, you know, a 10-year-old malt whiskey from, say, Scotland, but it will obviously pick up a lot of the oak, and well, we shall see if that is indeed true from the tasting. So right, I guess that's enough of the sort of introductory waffle. Shall I introduce the lineup then? Right, okay, so the real reason for doing this was obviously to sort of show you and present to you the John Paul whiskies. We will be looking at them obviously at 2 and 3. These are the sort of the new releases. They did, I believe, release I think it was some couple of cask strength bottlings, a peated and a non-peated, but we're looking at the 46% bottlings, which are really modestly priced, it has to be said, you know, in the £40 bracket. So the first one we'll be looking at is the bottling they've called Brilliance, which is unpeated, and the last one we'll be looking at is the peated one called Edited, and as you can see there's nothing left in the bottle, so can't have enjoyed that one, it has to be said, but I'm giving the game away a little bit there. So yeah, about sort of 3-4 years old, and I thought it would be interesting to compare it with the Amrut. Now not cheated as such, I'm probably doing it a bit, not a disservice, it's because the sample I have of Amrut is the old 40% bottling. This particular sample dates back from 2007 when I was first sent samples of the Amrut. So it's probably not really reflective of where it's at the moment, because I believe that they currently bottle, or their standard bottling, this one is now bottled at 46%, the same as the 2 John Pauls. So it's good enough, I think. It will do for hopefully what I'm hoping to show you this afternoon. But obviously that is not the current available bottling. It's moved on since then. So anyway, enough of all of that. Let's taste some whiskey then, shall we? Right. Okay. So as far as I'm aware, both of these distilleries use indigenous barley, so it will be you know, interesting to see if we get what character we get. So anyway, let's crack on with the Amrut then, shall we? It's soft, it's rounded, it's plenty of barley. It has that. It just has a very, very spey-like character. A lot of oak, big chunks of the stuff. A little bit of perfume. It's got a nice depth. There is a lot of oak there, which is, I guess, at the end of the day, like I was saying, the fact that the spirit will pick up the oak very, very quickly. And certainly as it's evaporating, you'll get more and more oak contact. So it's pleasant, it's nice. It certainly doesn't smell like a 3-year-old spirit. It certainly smells a lot older than that. Little bit of perfume, a little bit of dustiness. Palate. It's okay. Again, a lot of oak, lots of creamy vanillins, but not OTT creamy vanillins. Some barley, some rich malty, almost slightly molassy kind of character. Doesn't taste quite as evolved on the palate. It's got a youthful edge to it, which is not a surprise given the fact that it's only about sort of 3 or 4 years old. But it does again come across like like an 8-year-old spey, a fairly robust 8-year-old spey, it has to be said. It's a bit simple, it's straightforward, it's pleasant though, it has some nice barley moments, and some pleasant sort of sweetness on the finish, but it doesn't really sort of set me on fire. I mean, I have read that the current bottling, the 46%, just has a little bit more oomph to it, and I think that's possibly what the issue I have with it. It just feels a little bit under strength. It's all a bit, not flabby, but it's overly soft, and it just lacks that little bit of intensity. But you know, on the whole, you know, a really good spirit. Right, okay, and so on to the John Paul, the Brilliance. Let's see what the nose gives us on this then, shall we? Now that is lovely. Really fruity, lots of banana, apricot, quite estery, a little bit of boiled sweet, but there's a nice fresh note in there, a little bit of herbalness. Again, I think the 46% is kind of cutting through the oak. There's a fair amount of oak, but it just has that sort of herbally green, slight green fruit, but a lovely freshness. It really is quite fresh. I mean, I'm really impressed with this, and again, like I said, you know, for 40 odd quid, it's pretty good value, I think. Again, it sort of smells a lot more mature than it actually is. A little bit of dustiness, some lovely barley, got real sheen to it. Palate. Big, full, malty, rich, again a lot of oak, a lot of slightly toffeed vanillins, but again it has that sort of slightly fresh herbal, almost a little bit minty kind of character, and it evolves. You get sort of a little bit of coffee, a little bit of chocolate, again big barley, big oak, broad, juicy, a little bit of apricot now coming through on the finish, a little bit of honey as well, really complex, but that extra alcohol, that extra sort of 6% alcohol really does freshen it, and stops it becoming sort of overly flabby. So yeah, hats off. I really like that. That's really good. Right, okay, and on to the edited then, the peated version. That's nice. Quite floral. A little bit of violets, some high toned peat, a little bit of earth. Quite heavily peated in actual fact. I mean, I would guess that that's possibly somewhere in the 20-25 parts per million, possibly. So a lovely dusty violet note, some barley, not quite so much oak. It's not so broad. It's a little bit more linear, but I don't mean that in a bad way. It's a little bit more sharp, a little bit more focused. Again, you're getting some of the herbal notes. I think the peat and the earthy peatiness is kind of coming more to the front, and it's just sort of that's where your focus is, and so the oak is kind of sitting behind. But that's lovely. I really, really like that. It's harmonious. It's rounded. Got elegance as well. And it's not one dimensional. It's not sort of just all about the peat. You know, there's peat there. Again, it reminds me of a peated spey. It has sort of, you know, a real depth behind it. Not particularly much in the way of coastal character. Excuse me. A little bit of salt. But obviously that's coming from the peat. Yeah, that's a lovely nose. We get a little bit of citrus now, a little bit of slightly oily orange. Yeah, it's really complex. Palate. That peat comes rolling through. Kind of kicks off with a sort of grainy, coffee, toffee sort of character. Again, bit of wood, some rich, some fleshy fruit, a little bit of apricot, a little bit of banana, and then that lovely peaty character comes through. Really dry, dusty peat. A little bit of sort of creosote-y, oily character. Very, very long. Again, fresh, herbal on the finish. Really well balanced. I think that is an excellent whiskey, especially like me. If you like your peated malts, then again, it's not one-dimensional. It's got character, it's got length, and it evolves as you taste it. And like I said, it sort of starts off with the character of the spirit, and then you get the peat coming through. So, chewy, malty, really, really nice. Very, very good. Right, okay. Let's sum this little tasting up. Like I said, older bottling of Amrut, probably doing it a little bit of a disservice. It has to be said. I guess I possibly should have shown the current 46% release, but I think it basically shows that both distilleries are making very, very good quality whiskey. I have tasted the fusion, the peated malt that Amrut produce, and personally I think that's a little, certainly when tasted against the 40% bottling, I much preferred that. I thought that was just a better balanced whiskey. Just had a little bit more going on. The 40% bottling is a little flabby, it's a little overly oaked. There's not enough freshness, I think, from the alcohol to kind of cut through it all. I think 40% was not well. Yeah, I think it was a mistake. I think they probably should have opened up and it should have bottled it at 46% from the word go. I've not tasted the 46% bottling, so obviously I can't comment on whether it's better than this particular one. But you know, I don't think on the whole it's a bad whiskey. The John Paul, I think is exceptionally good. And again, like I said, you know, if you consider that a lot of whiskies from sort of, you know, different parts of the world that are pretty young have quite a high price tag for the exclusivity, I guess, and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, with these retailing in the sort of £40 kind of bracket, I think that they're remarkably good value for money, and I think they're definitely worth trying. And I certainly sold a few bottles over the Christmas period, so hopefully those of you that were convinced by me to buy them enjoyed them. I think the Brilliance is, well, brilliant, to be honest with you. I think it's an exceptionally good malt. Complexity, it has it. Freshness, it has it. lovely sort of balance, character. Yeah, I think that's really, really good. The peated version, equally as good. It's not fixated upon the peat. It's not all just about that. It has character. Again, you get spirit. It has balance, and God knows I go on about balance often enough. So yeah, I think that's really, really good, and it just goes to show that, you know, there are other distilleries in different countries that are producing, you know, wonderfully interesting whiskies, which, you know, hopefully, you know, after watching this, you might actually consider going out and purchasing and giving them a try, because it's not just Scotland that obviously makes good whiskey these days. So so yeah, there you have it. India, making good whiskey. So it's worth trying, shall we say? Anyway, so I hope you've enjoyed this this episode of the show, and I hope it sort of, you know, fires up your curiosity to give you know, these world whiskies a try. You know, not just the Indian whiskey. There's obviously the English whiskey, which I'm a really big fan of. There's the Dutch whiskey from the Zwiedam distillers. Again, although we haven't done an episode of the show on their whiskey, again, I'm a big fan of theirs. I really like what they're doing. And you know, there are again other distilleries. I kind of tasted. I think I've tasted, you know, from all over the world. Some of them just like the, you know, the sort of boutique-y sort of distilleries in the States were a little bit too young. Certainly the French whiskey, was it Amrut or something like that, that kind of suffers from that it's just, the spirit is just a little bit too young. But on the whole, I think there's, you know, a whole world of whiskey out there which is waiting to be discovered, and you know, I certainly suggest that you give them a try. But anyway, I think that's probably enough of today's rambling. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the show, and like I said, I hope this you know, fires up your you know, desire to try something other than Scottish whiskey. So anyway, all that's left to say is good afternoon and good rambling.